Joshua chapter 6, verse 1. Now the gates of Jericho were tightly shut because the people were afraid of the Israelites. No one was allowed to go out or in. Verse 2. But the Lord said to Joshua, I have given you Jericho, its king, and all its strong warriors. Verse 3. You and your fighting men should march around the town once a day for 6 days. Verse 4. 7 priests will walk ahead of the ark, each carrying a ram's horn. On the 7th day, you are to march around the town 7 times, with the priest blowing the horns. Verse 5. When you hear the priest give one long blast on the ram's horns, have all the people shout as loud as they can. Then the walls of the town will collapse, and the people can charge straight into the town. Verse 6. So Joshua called together the priests and said, Take up the ark of the Lord's covenant, and assign 7 priests to walk in front of it, each carrying a ram's horn. Verse 7. Then he gave orders to the people, March around the town, and the armed men will lead the way in front of the ark of the Lord. Verse 8. After Joshua spoke to the people, the 7 priests with the ram's horns started marching in front of the Lord, blowing the horn as they marched, and the ark of the Lord's covenant followed behind them. Verse 9. Some of the armed men marched in front of the priest with the horns, and some behind the ark, with the priest continually blowing the horns. Verse 10. Do not shout, do not even talk. Joshua commanded, not a single word from any of you until I tell you to shout, then shout. Verse 11. So the ark of the Lord was carried around the town once that day, and then everyone returned to spend the night in the camp. Verse 12. Joshua got up early the next morning, and the priest again carried the ark of the Lord. Verse 13. The 7 priests with the ram's horn marched in front of the ark of the Lord, blowing their horns. Again, the armed men marched both in front of the priest with the horns and behind the ark of the Lord. All this time, the priests were blowing their horns. Verse 14. On the 2nd day, they again marched around the town once and returned to the camp. They followed this pattern for 6 days. Verse 15. On the 7th day, the Israelites got up at dawn and marched around the town as they had done before, but this time they went around the town 7 times. Verse 16. On the 7th time around, as the priests sounded the long blast on their horns, Joshua commanded the people, Shout, for the Lord has given you the town. Verse 17. Jericho and everything in it must be completely destroyed as an offering to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and the others in her house will be spared, for she protected our spies. Verse 18. Do not take any of the things set apart for destruction, or you yourself will be completely destroyed, and you will bring trouble on the camp of Israel. Verse 19. Everything made from silver, gold, bronze, or iron is sacred to the Lord and must be brought into his treasury. Verse 20. When the people heard the sound of the ram's horn, they shouted as loud as they could. Suddenly, the walls of Jericho collapsed, and the Israelites charged straight into the town and captured it. Verse 21. They completely destroyed everything in it with their sword, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, goats, and donkeys. Verse 22. Meanwhile, Joshua said to the 2 spies, Keep your promise. Go to the prostitute's house and bring her out, along with all her family. Verse 23. Then the men who had been spies went in and brought out Rahab, her father, mother, brothers, and all the others' relatives who were with her. They moved her whole family to a safe place near the camp of Israel. Verse 24. Then the Israelites burned the town and everything in it. Only the things made from silver, gold, bronze, or iron were kept for the treasury of the Lord's house. Verse 25. So Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute and her relatives who were with her in the house, because she had hidden the spies Joshua sent to Jericho, and she lives among the Israelites to this day. Verse 26. At that time, Joshua invoked this curse: May the curse of the Lord fall on anyone who tries to rebuild the town of Jericho at the cost of his firstborn son. He will lay its foundation at the cost of his youngest son. He will set up its gate. Verse 27. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his reputation spread throughout the land. Amen.